Today, we're going to look at the origins of Valentine's Day, where it came from, and why this is even a day. Hello, and welcome back to Escapism Stories. I'm your host, Faye. This is Amiko, and we're both wishing you a very Merry Valentine's Day. Is that a thing? I don't know. Today we decided we're going to do a deep dive into what even is Valentine's Day. It's one of those days which is kind of like you buy stuff for your partner and that's just meant to symbolize how much you love them and how much they love you. Don't get me wrong, I do love me some flowers and some chocolate, and I do like a card. So I guess I'm kind of in on this tradition, but also it's a bit of a money grab and people just buying stuff for the sake of it because the supermarkets are selling it. So what are you going to do with all the weird little teddy bears holding hearts, you know? So today we're going to look at the origins of Valentine's Day, where it came from, and why this is even a day. So let's get into it. The origins of the word Valentine is actually marred with a story of beheading and has got nothing to do with romance at all. The name Valentine comes from St Valentine, and he was possibly one of 3 different priests. The first one could have been the Bishop of Torini. The second one could have been a priest from North Africa, although historians don't actually count him because there's not enough evidence, but we're going to throw him in there anyway. And then the third one was a Christian priest from Rome. These stories all date back to around 248 AD, and the priest of Torini and the Christian priest from Rome, their stories are so similar, historians have just kind of thought it's just one of them. The story goes, under Emperor Claudius II, this Christian priest was preaching Christianity on the street, and he was also marrying couples. Thing that Claudius II didn't like is he was not down with couples being married because he felt that soldiers, when they were married, cared more about their wives and their children than they did fighting in war. So for him, not only preaching Christianity, but also marrying young men off was just a no for him. So this priest was then imprisoned. During his imprisonment, he was placed in the care of a guy called Astrius. Whilst he was imprisoned, he kept preaching Christianity to Astrius, and Astrius said, "Look, if it's real, then can you heal my daughter?" Some sources say it could have been a son. So this Christian priest did some healing magic on Astrius's son or daughter, and miraculously their sight was healed. They could see again. Astrius was then blown away, converted to Christianity, as well as his whole household. When Claudius II found out, everyone was executed, but this priest was executed in a more brutal way. He was stoned, he was flogged, and then he was beheaded. On Valentine's Day, there we go. And that's where the Valentine's Day link with February the 14th comes into play. Valentine's legend was further solidified in 496 AD under Pope Gallius I. Gallius ordered a basilica, which was basically a massive church, to be built on top of Valentine's grave. February the 13th to the 15th had long been marked Lupercalia, which was a pagan Roman festival associated with fertility, purification, and excess. To override these old gods, the church declared that St Valentine would be honored on the 14th, quietly replacing pagan celebration with Christian remembrance. So again, this guy became a saint, Saint Valentine, and that's where that story comes from. So where does romance come into this? Because Saint Valentine is actually known as the saint of beekeeping as one of them. He's not really known for romance. The link with romance and Valentine's Day came from the English poet Geoffrey Chaucer. In 1381, he wrote a poem titled The Parliament of the Fowls, and Chaucer's specific lines from this poem said, "For this was St. Valentine's Day, when every fowl cometh there to choose his mate." The reason why he said the 14th in his poem is because he noticed that on February the 14th was when a lot of birds started mating. So that's where that poem came from. And mating
it's really
birds
cool we still have
symbolize
this letter from
romance and fertility
1477.
as we enter into spring. This idea then caught on, and in 1415, after the Battle of Agincourt, Charles, Duke of Orleans, wrote a letter to his wife whilst he was being imprisoned in the Tower of London, and this was considered the very first Valentine's Day letter. A side story about Charles: he ended up being imprisoned for 25 years in the Tower of London, and by the time he was released, unfortunately his wife had died. So that's a sad story. He then went on to marry and then had 3 other kids and became like a really well-known poet, but that's his story. Another notable figure who was associated with Valentine's Day was Margaret Bruce, who wrote to her one true love in 1477, and we still have her letter that she wrote today. It's housed in the British Library. In the letter, she's pleading with him not to leave her because of her low dowry. And a dowry back then was given by the families of the wives to the husband as kind of like, you marry her and you also get a sum of money, I guess, to keep her, I don't know. This one has a happy ending. They get married, they end up having kids, and it was all great. But it's really cool we still have this letter from 1477. Going back to Lupercalia, which was the festival outlawed by Pope Gelasius I, this festival seems to be the earliest example of Valentine's Day. Historians believe that it began in 6th century BC with the origins of Rome, and the story of which is so interesting. The name Lupercalia, also known as the Wolf Festival, comes from the word Lupercal, and this was the name of the cave where Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome, were nursed by a she-wolf. Yeah, a she-wolf. So the story goes, in the 6th century BC, the twins' father, King Amulus, ordered that they should be drowned as infants in the river Tiber after their mother broke her vow of celibacy. I mean, I'm assuming because her vow of celibacy, she couldn't have had twins, so maybe she slept with someone else. That's probably what it is. Having been placed in a basket by a servant that took pity on them, they were pushed down the river. I mean, we've definitely heard this story before. But whilst they were being pushed down the river, their little basket got caught on a fig tree, which is very, very Rome. They were discovered by a female wolf who took them to her cave at the base of Palatine Hill and raised them both, and this was where Rome was founded. So the festival itself seems to be a bit of a fertility festival, but it was also very, very sexually charged. So the festival begins at the Lupercal cave, where they sacrificed a goat and a dog because of some fertility thing. They would then smear themselves with the blood of these sacrifices, and then they would wipe off the blood with wool soaked in milk. I don't know the significance of why it was specifically wool soaked in milk. They would then use the flesh of their sacrifices, and this is where it gets really weird. And they would basically, this sounds wild, but they would basically kind of run down the street. They would whip women who seemed to want this because it helped promote fertility. So yeah, it was that was the festival. That was one part of this Lupercal festival, just whipping women with bits of animal skin for fertility. But okay, Amiko's very uncomfortable. The second part of the festival, women's names were drawn from a jar, and they were then kind of coupled up for the duration of the festival by a man who pulled a woman's name from the jar. And a lot of these couples ended up staying together and getting married. So yeah, this festival seemed to be a bit of a bloody love festival, I guess, like for younger people to meet their partner. Yeah, it was all different back in Rome in the 6th century. And maybe that was why Pope Gelasius I kind of outlawed it, because it was a bit bloody. I don't know. But the thing is, because it was so bloody, red is obviously the color of blood, and Valentine's Day is associated with the color of red. So that's kind of, again, where this association with the color red of Valentine's Day could have come from. It could have come from the Lupercalia festival, dated back from ancient Rome in the 6th century. So we now need to talk about Cupid, because where does then Cupid come into all of this? So we've got Valentine, we know he was a saint. We've got the origin of, I guess, the color red, and the very first kind of Valentine's Day-esque thing that happens on February the 14th. But where does Cupid come in? The story of Cupid dates back to Roman mythology. Cupid was the son of Venus, and maybe also the son of Mercury, but he was definitely the son of Venus. In ancient poetry, Cupid was armed with the bow and quiver of arrows. He had golden arrows to spark love and affection, and lead arrows to ignite hatred and disgust. Cupid shot his arrows in the hearts of unsuspecting humans and mythological gods. He was a trickster, and he liked to play with emotions. One of these trickster stories about Cupid goes that he shot another god called Apollo in the heart with the golden arrow. Apollo then fell madly in love with a nymph named Daphne. Then Cupid shot Daphne in the heart with the lead arrow, so she was completely just repulsed by Apollo. He's a little shiz. What a little shiz. Another legend about Cupid was that Venus felt madly jealous of a mortal woman named Psyche. So she told Cupid to go shoot Psyche with a lead arrow and make her fall in love with the monster. But this whole plan completely backfired because Cupid then fell in love and then married Psyche, and she then had to become part of Venus's family. So that's fun. They then went on to have a child, which is also really sweet. In early mythology, Cupid was represented as a handsome immortal who was irresistible to women and gods, of course. But it was in later stories down the line that he slowly then shrunk and then became like the little fat baby that we know who goes around with his little arrows and his wings, and basically becoming the mascot for Valentine's Day. So that's the origins behind Cupid. So looking back at the mythology of Valentine's Day, we've got a beheading, we've got some blood sacrifices and some whipping, and we've also got a little mischievous god who just goes around shooting people without their consent. And thus Valentine's Day as a day was created. The Victorians really picked up on this day with the advent of the printing press, and that was where Hallmark then just started mass printing cards, and it's now turned into the holiday that we know right now, where it's just a whole bunch of stuff you can buy your loved one. So yeah, that's the history of Valentine's Day. Whether you celebrate it or not, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed researching it. This sort of stuff is just like my favorite. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye!